Number 6, it is being projected that the radioactivity off coastal waters off the U.S. West Coast could double over the next 5 to 6 years.
I'll bet sooner.
I think that's being pretty generous. Yeah. I think it's going to happen sooner,
That's
and there's many different things that need to be taken into account. How much radioactivity might be carried from this debris. Much of it is porous. Cloth and styrofoam and wood that's going to collect particles that have been raining out over the past 2.5 years. And then we also have a situation of uranium buckyballs, and now the newest finding, cesium buckyballs. That was just reported today. Leuren can explain a little bit more about that, but we don't know how those things travel in the ocean waters.
Yes, scientists are reporting that spheres of radioactive material from Fukushima are being reported for the first time. Ball-like particles composed of cesium, iron, zinc, solid and insoluble in water. Impact on human health needs to be examined. What they're talking about are nanoparticles, and they are produced, these spherical particles. I know all about this because depleted uranium is just like this. And this indicates, since these are being reported now, very recently, as a new phenomenon, it means that the fuel rods are burning in Fukushima at extremely high temperatures. It means there's no water in the pools or some of the pools. And what happens at these very high temperatures is that they're so high, the burning fuel rods release a gas, a very hot gas, that condenses and collects as a spherical radioactive particle when the very hot gas begins to chill. That indicates that Fukushima fuel rods are definitely burning at extremely high temperatures, and that was not reported right after the Fukushima earthquake and tsunami. So that place is going in flames and releasing extremely radioactive, very, very dangerous spherical nanoparticles of mixed radioactive isotopes. And those tiny spheres are extremely dangerous because they have an effect called the particulate effect. They actually change chemicals and interfere with cell processes that are life-threatening and cause very high rates of various illnesses caused by ionizing radiation. But there is our proof right there that Fukushima is on fire.
Unbelievable.
I have a question. Leuren, have you ever heard of this type of nanoparticle before in a reactor accident?
No, but
I hadn't either.
No, I haven't either, but it's definitely a characteristic of depleted uranium, from the battlefield. Uranium is a pyrophoric metal. It catches on fire very, very easily, and it burns at temperatures up to 5,000 degrees centigrade, which is hotter than the sun. So these tiny particles are the most lethal part of the danger of a nuclear power plant burning or using depleted uranium weapons. And of course, we know at Fukushima that they have MOX fuel in one of the reactors. That's mixing plutonium and uranium in the fuel, and it's very unstable, and it burns at very high temperatures. And of course, plutonium is extremely lethal to living organisms.
Number 7, experts have found very high levels of cesium-137 in plankton living in the waters of the Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and the West Coast.
Oh, that isn't normal, huh?
Well, they detected 2 weeks after the accident already very high levels in the kelp off BC. And that at that time it was iodine 131, I believe, which after 40 days dissipates, but 129 sticks around for much longer. I have an article called The Bioaccumulation of Contamination in Plankton. This is from the U.S. Armed Forces in 1955. Plankton concentrate mineral elements from the water, and it has been found that radioactivity may be concentrated in this manner by as much as 1,000 times. Thus, for example, 1 gram of plankton could contain 1,000 times as much radioactivity as a gram of water adjacent to it.
Unreal.
And I believe we know even more now than we did back then, but I mean, this is bad news for anything in the ocean that lives on plankton, which is everything, but things that feed directly on it, like whales, for instance.
It's the base of the food chain, and what we know about bioaccumulation in seaweed is that seaweed bioconcentrates ionizing radiation in the seawater to 150,000 times higher levels in seaweed than in the water the seaweed is living in.
Unbelievable.
So number
8
is one test in California found that 15 out of 15 bluefin tuna were contaminated with radiation from Fukushima. That was just about a year ago when tuna off the coast of San Diego were sampled, and I think all of them had cesium in the flesh, and these tuna had come from Japan, which is where they spawn offshore from Fukushima.
Yeah, number 9 ties into that too. Back in 2012, the Vancouver Sun reported cesium-137 being found in a very high percentage of the fish that Japan was selling to Canada. 73% of the mackerel tested, 91% of the halibut, 92% of the sardines. Of course, now the sardines from here have disappeared. 93% of the tuna and eel, 94% of the cod and anchovies, and 100% of the carp, seaweed, shark, and monkfish.
100%.
100%, and that is because the levels in these different fish depend on their diet. So fish that prey on other fish usually have lower levels than fish that feed on plankton, for instance, or their bottom feeders, and they pick up mud and small particles which have higher levels of radiation because of the chemical affinity that tiny particles have for radiation. In other words, very tiny clay particles in water are they are scavengers for highly charged radioactive particles. 10. Canadian authorities are finding extremely high levels of nuclear radiation in certain fish samples, and that's some fish samples they tested have very high levels of radiation. One sea bass sample collected in July, for example, had 1,000 becquerels. That means disintegrations per second per kilogram of cesium. Now, the terrible thing about cesium is that it affects the heart. It is collected in the heart, and the heart produces new cells only about 5% per year. So we're seeing athletes, racehorses, celebrities during performance, pilots while they're flying are collapsing, they're dying of heart attacks or cardiac failure. And this is being very widely reported in the U.S. and Alaska flight crews, and also in England in football players, racehorses. That's the cesium damage. Now, what people don't realize is that nearly 2,000 radioactive isotopes are produced in a fissioning process, and that's what's coming out of burning and coming out of the fuel rods. So you have to multiply that the danger of the cesium they're reporting by almost 2,000 other isotopes, we're getting absolutely bombarded